Welcome to Talk is Cheap. Today we've got a real interesting subject. We're going to be talking with John Birrenbach from the Institute for Hemp. Yes, we're going to be talking about marijuana, pot, weed, but you're going to find out some very interesting facts that maybe you didn't know before. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks.
I'm sure when I said hemp and marijuana, most people jumped to thinking about the joint, smoking pot, drug use. And actually, from what I've read of your literature, the Institute for Hemp has nothing to do with the illegal drug use of hemp.
Exactly. The Institute for Hemp is designed and is functioning mainly to bring about the commercial applications for the plant, making rope, paper, cloth, fuels for cars, food for animals and people.
Mm-hmm. And this is really nothing new. This is something that has a history, a long history.
This is something we've known about for, well, the history of hemp goes back to 10,000 years. There's evidence to believe that hemp was one of the very first cultivated crops, primarily because the seed was a valuable food source, the fiber from the stem was a valuable clothing source, and early man used it as an intoxicant as well. So there's a great deal of evidence to lead us to believe that hemp was, in fact, the very first cultivated crop of mankind. So we have a great deal of history with this plant.
Okay, why don't you tell me a little bit about the history of the Institute? How did you get into this?
I got involved in this after a friend of mine showed me a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, written by Jack Harrar. He said, you have to read this book. I took the book, I read it, found it extremely compelling to a point where I couldn't really put the book down and was falling asleep before I finally put it down, picked it up again the next day, finished it off, and my entrepreneurial mind said, there's a tremendous amount of money here to be made if we can reestablish hemp as a commercial crop in the United States. And that's what inspired me to begin talking more about this, because I was aware you could use hemp to make rope, but I didn't understand that you could make clothing out of it. You could make every grade of cloth. You could make every grade of paper. We could fuel our cars and trucks on it. We could lubricate our engines with hemp seed oil. We could use hemp seed oil in cooking as a nutritional substitute. We could use the food from the hemp seed. The applications just went on and on and on, and basically dollar signs sprung up in my eyes and said, if I can get a very, very small piece of this potential pie, not only will I be set, but the rest of my generational families will be set from now until the end of time.
Mm-hmm. Now, the book that you mentioned, The Emperor Has No Clothes, has some astounding facts about the plant, some of what you just mentioned.
Yeah, very astounding facts, like the fact that the reason Napoleon marched into Russia in the dead of winter was to cut off the hemp supply that Russia was selling to the English, who the French were at war with. Being a slight history buff, I had always wondered why Napoleon, one of the world's greatest generals, would pick such an inopportune time to march into Russia. It all suddenly became clear. So many of the other facts, the fact that 1 acre of hemp would equal 4 acres of trees in the production of paper products alone is reason enough to cultivate hemp. We no longer have to tear down trees and forests in order to produce paper. In fact, on about 1% of the farmland, we can produce all of the paper that's used by trees, used by the United States and produced from trees in the course of 1 year, and add $20 to $30 billion to the farm economy at the same time. So we're talking about a tremendous impact here.
And you're also, if I remember correctly, the quality or grade of paper can be every bit as good as that comes from traditional wood.
Back in 1916, the Department of Agriculture had already seen that we would not be able to sustain paper production and lumber production from the forests that we had at that time. So they began investigations into a number of crops. They included corn and basically anything that was a farm waste at the time, which hemp had a part of it was farm waste. The herds or the inner core of the plant was basically something that was just thrown away or burned as fuel. They looked at that to see if they could use it to make paper, and in fact found that they could make every grade of paper, including a #1 book grade finished paper, from that hemp herd material, and that given at the rates of production at that time, they figured 1 acre of hemp would equal 4 acres of trees. I've looked at that particular information and brought it forward to the 1990s. In 1916, hemp cultivation was 25% of that, which it is worldwide now. They were only producing 4 tons of hemp to the acre. We're now producing anywhere between 8 and 12 tons of hemp per acre. So we're looking at a tremendous increase in the amount of paper that could be produced from hemp. And we're looking at figures now, 1 acre of hemp will save anywhere between 8 and 16 acres of trees. And depending on the sustainability of forests, the amount could go as high as 50 acres of trees saved from 1 acre of hemp.
Now, hemp is an annual plant, so every year you would be able to grow it, make your paper, whereas trees
is
take
a
a number of
20-year
years.
process. You basically need to have enough land set aside for 20 years in order to cultivate enough trees to keep a particular paper mill in operation. As you said, hemp's an annual plant, easily rotated with other crops so that it could be put into a rotation scheme. It's extremely friendly to the soil. It's a non-environmentally dangerous plant to grow. Unlike corn and a majority of the other plants, hemp requires no fertilizers, requires no pesticides, requires no herbicides, requires no additional watering. In Minnesota, hemp's going to be a big-time industry.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about paper. Now, you've brought some products today that are made from hemp.
From hemp.
Now, are any of these products made in the United States?
The products themselves are made in the United States. The raw materials that go into the products are produced overseas. Primarily China and Hungary are the major exporters of hemp to the United States right now.
So they are actually cultivating hemp as a export product.
Actually, many countries are cultivating hemp. They are primarily cultivating it for an export product. Other countries are cultivating it for in-country use with very little export. France cultivates, Spain cultivates, Italy, Yugoslavia, Hungary. Pretty much most of the southern republics of the former USSR cultivate, Russia cultivates, India to a certain degree, and this year in 1992, actually last year, England cultivated its first crop in probably over 60 years. So there's an expansion of the hemp industry taking place worldwide at this point. We're getting indications from Canada that if not next year or 1994, 1995, Canada will be cultivating hemp.
And at one time, hemp was an agricultural product for the United States.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Minnesota has a long, long history of hemp. Hemp was one of the first crops that we cultivated here. I've looked at the historical documents contained at the History Museum and stuff, and there's many reports from people that, early settlers of Minnesota, writing back home saying, come on out, the hemp grows great, crops grow great, the food is plentiful, this is a perfect place to go. We cultivated hemp all the way up until 1939 when they made marijuana illegal and in the process killed the hemp industry in the United States. Remarkably, a couple of years later, we had a war. That war brought back hemp cultivation for a number of years because the Japanese cut off the sources of fiber from the Philippines. So the Department of Agriculture put together some materials, demanded farmers in the Midwest view the films and sign documents that they had viewed the films and understood that hemp was a valuable war material, and increased cultivation again, and spread hemp throughout Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Kentucky were the primary hemp producers during the war. And if it had not been for that hemp, we wouldn't have had a lot of the materials that we needed for World War II.
Let's talk about some of the products you brought here today.
We've got some shirts that are made out of a blend of hemp and cotton.
Now, the clothing or cloth that's made, it has the same capabilities that it does for paper, of making just about any
For
quality
basically
or grade?
making about any grade of quality or grade of cloth can be made out of hemp. Traditionally, people think of linen as being one of the finest materials, your fine silk linens and stuff. They've actually found that most of the linen that we're familiar with that was made prior to 1850 or so is made predominantly out of cannabis hemp. This is why it lasts so much longer. Hemp is considered by fiber experts to be the Cadillac of fibers. It's the BMW. It's the fiber to which all other fibers are compared to, at least in the form of natural fibers. It's 10 times stronger than cotton. It's more absorbent than cotton. It's more water retentive than cotton, which is partly the reason why we add cotton to the cloth when they make clothing out of it, because the cotton helps to wick away some of the water from the hemp. It's extremely durable. It can be used to manufacture basically any type of cloth. You can see we've got several different types here.
Now this looks like this shirt looks almost like a denim.
That's basically a denim type shirt. We've also got some hats here that are basically made out of a denim and made in a traditional denim type of a weave.
This looks almost like corduroy.
It's, yeah, very much like a corduroy. It's just another example of the very different types of weaves that can be done. Here's a herringbone type of a weave that gives you the nice little V-type look to it. Hemp's an extremely versatile fiber. It can be used to manufacture all these different types of cloths and a bunch of others that I wasn't able to bring up.
Okay, now paper and cloth are just two of the many things that it can be used for. I mean, I was surprised at some of the products you brought today. Not only can you wear it, but you can ingest it.
Exactly. We've got the hemp seed we found in comparison to soybeans, to which everyone is familiar with. Hemp seed is second only to soybeans in total protein content. But that's a bit deceptive because there are animal digestive proteins and there are human digestible proteins. Hemp seed is the #1 human digestible protein manufacturer over soybeans. Soybeans is the #1 animal digestible protein that's produced. So for food, hemp seed is by far superior for humans to consume than soybeans. We can take the hemp seed, and basically anything that's produced from soybeans can be produced from hemp seed as well. All your tofus, we could grind it to flour, we can squeeze the seeds and produce oil. Hemp seed for an oil content has anywhere between a 40 and 45% by weight is oil. Grind it to use it to make flour. Basically all the different things that are made out of soybeans could be made out of hemp, and it'd be by far more nutritionally beneficial to people to eat hemp seed tofu than it would be to eat soybean tofu. There's some interesting facts coming out about hemp seed's nutritional content, that it's the #1 in essential fatty acids, which are things that your body uses to fight immune disorders. And people are looking into the fact whether or not the fact that we no longer have hemp seed in our diets like we used to have it as a reason why we're seeing more diseases, we're seeing more cancers and stuff like this, because the immune systems are not being given the proper nutritional elements that they need in order to function properly.
So it sounds like you're saying that people in the United States used to have hemp in their diets.
In their diets, yes. We no longer have it in our diets. And that may be some of the causes of heart disease and some of this other stuff, is that we don't have the immune processes are not working at their full optimum capabilities because they don't have the nutritional balance.
Okay. I see from Steve over there, we're going to take a short break, then we'll be right back with more.
Sulak for 3. What a first half for Pete Sulak. 20 points.
Children are the largest group of Americans living below the poverty line. They have to reach higher for what others take for granted: health care, balanced meals, encouragement to learn. But with help early on, children in your community can gain the skills to get out from below the poverty line. It takes programs like Success by 6 and people like you to help them take the first step. Call to learn more. Change the world of a child, and you change the world.
Vince, that new dummy cam is great.
Yeah, it'll sure give people a whole new outlook on what it's like when you don't wear a safety belt.
I think they'll get the picture.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
She is one of America's toughest drug enforcement agents. Last year, she helped convict 90 drug dealers, seize several tons of crack and marijuana, and close down 10 major drug operations. She is a 68-year-old grandmother named Irma. She set up a community drug watch that is not only changing her neighborhood, but its future. There are many ways to help in your community. Call the Points of Light Foundation. Do something good. Feel something real.
We're back at Talk is Cheap. And before we went to the break, John, you were explaining some of the nutritional values of hemp and how it can be used in flour and oil form and such. Now, hemp can also be used as a fuel, if I understand correctly.
The hemp seed oil itself could be burned much like we burn diesel fuel. Actually, the very first diesel engines were designed to be run on vegetable oil. Actually, the internal combustion engines were designed to be run on ethanol and methanol. It wasn't until the petroleum industry got involved and alcohol became illegal that the tax on alcohol and the prohibition of alcohol forced people to use other substitutes to run their automobiles and such on and run their small engines. But the very first diesel engines were designed to be run on vegetable oil. All these engines were designed to be self-sustaining. You were supposed to be able to produce your fuel right there on your premises with either a pyrolytic converter to make methanol or a distillery to make ethanol or a seed press in order to press oil and just pour it into your gas tank and be able to go. Unfortunately now, the way we've remodified the diesel engine in order to run on diesel fuel, there are some modifications that need to be done to the diesel engine, or you need to mix the oil with some diesel fuel in order to get the proper combustion ratios and stuff like that. As everyone knows, all of the cars out in Indianapolis run on methanol. There's no reason at all why automobiles can't run on methanol. My indications are that 1 acre of hemp will equal about 20 barrels of oil in the form of BTU energy. We have to get down to a basic level of BTU energy, and 1 acre of hemp produced into charcoalized material to run in coal plants, the seed oil crushed and used for diesel fuel, and then the stalks ground up and put into a pyrolytic converter and either turned into ethanol or methanol, that we're going to get about 20 barrels of petroleum product equivalent energy out of that 1 acre of hemp.
Now, for those people like myself, how much is 20 barrels?
20 barrels, it's a big complicated figure. Basically, 1 acre, the hemp will produce fuel for your automobile at approximately the current value, the current price that you're paying for petroleum fuels. The benefits are going to be methanol is an environmentally friendly fuel source. It's a biomass produced fuel source, so that the hemp that's cultivated this year draws CO2 out of, and combustion gases out of the air in order for its cultivation to take place. Then when you turn the product into fuel and burn it as energy, these materials are given off, which are taken up again by the next year. So it's a closed cycle, whereas with petroleum now we're basically pulling stuff out of the ground and burning it and adding tremendous amounts of CO2 to the environment. That's why we're seeing the greenhouse effect and everything that everyone's so concerned about. Hemp as a fuel source will help close that loop and make it a closed cycle. In fact, if we use hemp to cultivate for a fuel source, hemp is a plant that really draws a majority of its nutrients from the air, which is why we don't need to give it fertilizers and stuff like this. It draws the nitrogen and the carbon dioxide, most of what it needs, right directly from the air around it, that it will act as a giant sponge. And if we were to convert production of fuel from the petroleum products and the fossil fuels into biomass products, and we used hemp as the primary biomass producer, that the amount of CO2 would actually go down in the environment, because the amount of hemp that would be left in the ground and the leaves and stuff that would fall off in it that wouldn't be converted to a fuel source would actually act as a sponge and help suck up some of that CO2. So we could in effect probably reduce the greenhouse effect, if not reverse the greenhouse effect. We could most certainly stop any further accumulation of CO2 in the environment, any expansion of the greenhouse effect.
Okay. Are there any other uses that we have not touched on so far?
As I delve into hemp, I find more and more uses that I hadn't even thought of before. Most recently, a company in Oregon has conducted some experiments on hemp and have determined that they can make a particle board, or a pressed particle board for furniture and for home construction out of hemp that is far superior to wood particle board construction. So we're looking at construction materials that could be made out of hemp. Within the last 2 months, I've gotten information from a company in France called La Chanvre, which is the French word for hemp, they're building homes out of hemp. Basically, from the ground up, they've built 200 homes that are made almost entirely out of hemp, or have hemp in most of the construction. They've used hemp as a filler source in the concrete for the basement. They've used particleized hemp and compressed hemp as a insulative source in the walls. They've used particle board made out of hemp as the actual walls themselves. They've used hemp in the different types of, I'm trying to remember what it is now, it's the spackling compounds and stuff like that that they use for drywall and things like that. So in effect, we could make a house out of hemp. So the applications for hemp are really pretty much endless. Plastics could be made out of hemp. Most people are familiar with cellophane. The beginning of the word cellophane, cellulose. They made cellophane initially out of plant cellulose. Most of your plastics today could be made from plant cellulose. They're only made from petroleum products because they're easily obtained and cheaply drilled out of the ground. So in effect, we could make plastic products out of hemp as well. You can see all of the different products that are made out of hemp if we were to use plastic.
So our fold lock sandwich bags
could all be made out of cellophane made from hemp.
in a cardboard box
In a cardboard box made out of hemp, printed with hemp ink. I've gotten samples of inks from a company over in England. They're making printing inks out of hemp seed oil rather than using soybean oil. So we're looking at hemp really reaching into the facets of everything that is on the shelf of a supermarket or any convenience store or anything like that could have hemp in its manufacture somewhere along the line, either in the paper that it's wrapped in, the cellophane, the plastic that it's wrapped in, the fuel that transported it or produced the product. Hemp has the potential to affect every facet of American life.
Now, we've already mentioned that a number of other countries, and it sounds like maybe the majority of other countries, are growing hemp.
To some extent.
To some extent. Economically, what does it mean to some of these countries?
To some of these countries, they're not benefiting from hemp like they could. China is primarily cultivating hemp to manufacture clothing and to export the seed to the United States and the former Soviet Union. They're not using hemp to make particle board. They are making a small amount of paper. I've got some samples here of a type of paper that's made from 50% hemp and 50% cereal straw. But they're not really utilizing it for its fuel applications and all of this type of stuff. I've estimated for the United States, and that's where I've tried to focus because I'm trying to bring hemp to the United States, that for paper production alone, hemp is worth a minimum of $30 billion annually to the rural farm economy. That's to the farmer's pocket. That's not to anyone who manufactures products from that. We're looking at probably an additional $30 billion in added rural jobs. Some of those jobs are going to come from where the current, where trees are being manufactured into paper. Those jobs are going to shift to rural America. But we're looking at $30 billion annually there, just from the production of paper alone. If hemp were to replace cotton, cotton's a $10 to $15 billion a year industry in the United States and requires half of all the pesticides and herbicides and stuff that are produced in the United States. If hemp were to replace soybeans, we're looking at, well, for Minnesota alone, soybeans is the #2 crop, and it's a $90 million a year industry.
For the United States? Or
for Minnesota alone.
For Minnesota. So we're
Yes.
talking some very large numbers.
We're talking
here.
very large numbers. If we use hemp to manufacture a few plastics and enough fuel to supply the transportation sector of our economy, hemp's worth at least $500 billion a year annually to the farm and rural economy. So we're talking about a tremendous amount of money here, and we've only tapped it for 3 or 4 of its potential resources. Hemp could, for all intents and purposes, replace anything that's made from a tree. Anything that's made from a tree, and practically anything that's made from a petroleum product. So when you look at the size of those two industries, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars annually for the United States alone. Worldwide, the figure's astronomical.
Do you have any idea how much hemp is imported into the United States for these purposes?
Right now we're seeing about, the figures are really tough to nail down, but we're seeing about $100 million worth of hemp being imported into the United States.
So these are dollars going out of the United States?
These are dollars going out of the United States, going to China, Hungary, and a couple of other smaller countries. that material itself is probably turned into, here in the United States, approximately $250 million worth of products annually. So that's American jobs that are benefiting from the fact that this stuff is coming in now, that we wouldn't otherwise be benefiting from. Most of the companies that are manufacturing these products are companies that were primarily manufacturing other things before, and their industry, they were being cut out because of other larger manufacturers moving in. There's a former defense contractor up in Montana that's no longer making combat boots for the U.S. Marines. They're making combat boots out of hemp for the American public now. So we
don't have the Marines yet wearing hemp boots.
We don't have the Marines yet wearing hemp boots, at least hemp fabric boots. There are a number of government specifications that require cannabis hemp to be in the product if you're to sell it to the government. Some of those products are parachute webbing. Boots are said to be sewn. The thread that's used to sew the leather together is supposed to be made out of hemp because it's one of the most durable fibers and it doesn't break. So that, the U.S. government is asking for hemp to be in these products, but yet we're not allowing the cultivation of hemp, and we're being forced to import these products in order to supply the U.S. government to a certain extent as well.
We're running short on time, so we're going to have to ask John to come back next week for part 2 to talk about some of the legal issues and why we're not growing hemp in the United States. So if this week got you interested, make sure you're here next week to find out more on the topic.